Nowadays, there is news everywhere. You open the newspaper and there are headlines about research and things that are going on and what we need to know about what to eat and what not to eat and how to parent, how not to parent. There are magazines. They'll tell you how to lose weight, how to gain weight, how to put mascara on so that it lasts longer. Anything and everything you want to know. There's research on it. But is it good research? Is it quality research? How do we know? How do you discern what's good and what's not? Well, I would encourage you to go to scholarly journals. These big, heavy things that are found in the library. Now, you'll probably actually never see one of these because you can get most of the peer-reviewed articles online through some type of research portal or through Google Scholar or something of that nature. But these articles have been peer-reviewed. Experts have looked at them and they have said these are worthwhile. These contribute to our knowledge, they have good, solid methodology, and they add something. Now, for you to be a good consumer of research, there are a couple things that you need to know, and you can actually discern what's good, what's not. Or maybe research that is good, but we need to ask more questions to further our understanding so that we have a good grasp of what is important. Now, that's especially important in the field of exceptional child psychology because there are all kinds of beliefs based on one study here, or some parent thought this, or some professional said don't eat this, or do eat that, or try this. And what we find is that people will grasp at straws of interventions that aren't empirically validated. They aren't evidence-based. So how do you know what's good research? What are good strategies to use? Well, there are a couple things. First, you have to remember that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. So just because two things are correlated doesn't mean that one caused the other. Let me give you an example that came straight out of the headlines. A few years ago, Belsky actually did some research and released that childcare is linked to aggression. Well, what happened was the papers ran with that, and that started what we call the mommy wars. There were comics in the papers. There were news headlines everywhere. Childcare causes aggression. Daycare is evil. Parents shouldn't work. Moms need to stay at home. All the moms who worked were feeling guilt-tripped and defending their position. All the moms who stayed at home were like, we're vindicated. We've been telling you this forever. And what we found was that there were other factors. There were moderators and mediators, things that changed the relationship or explained it. For example, what we found is that kids with difficult temperaments were actually more susceptible to poor quality childcare than kids who didn't. So temperament moderated. It changed the direction of that association. We also find mediators. It might be that poor quality childcare leads to teachers who are inadequately trained and interact in coercive, intrusive ways with the children, which is later predictive of child aggression. Or what we just find is that quantity of childcare is linked to aggression because kids who stay in childcare for extended periods of time come from high-risk families where they're experiencing a lot of other risk factors that might actually be explaining that aggression. So you need to be a good consumer. Think about what might be confounding third factors that aren't included in a research study. We also talk about reliability or consistency. In other words, if I want to measure something, for example, personality, and I measure it on day one, if I measure it a week later, do we want our personality to completely change? Well, I hope not. If it does, then maybe we should see somebody to get that looked at. But ideally, it should be stable. We want reliability, that consistency across time periods. We also want inter-rater reliability. So if I rate somebody's parenting as intrusive, we want another professional to rate them at the same level of intrusiveness so that it's not just, well, this researcher found that the parent was intrusive, but all researchers would find that that parent was intrusive. It's what we call inter-rater reliability, and we assess that. But what we're really concerned with are issues of validity, the truthfulness of the study. And there are two types of validity, internal and external. Internal looks at within the study, are we measuring what we're intending to measure? If I wanted to measure IQ, would I measure it by saying, hey, if you can hold this book on your head for a long period of time, then you have a high IQ. Higher holding the book, higher IQ. Well, that would work, but that would be ridiculous, right? Because book holding, not related at all to IQ. And so we want to make sure that we're measuring what we're intending to measure. And the way that we look at that are through things like convergent and discriminant validity. Do the scores on my assessment converge with other factors that I would expect it to? So for example, with IQ, it should be correlated with academic achievement. And does it not converge with things we wouldn't expect it to? So IQ should not necessarily be linked to aggression. And so we look for those two types of validity within that internal validity. And the other that we look at is external validity, the generalizability of the study. So if I do a study with only affluent, upper middle class, white children who are between the ages of 3 and 5, can I generalize to all of Head Start who serves low-income 3 to 5-year-olds? No, I can't, because they're two different populations and there might be other factors in that selection that aren't accounted for. So we need to look at the generalizability as well. Now the same things go through with assessment. When we assess kids, we want to make sure that we are assessing what we're intending to assess. And what we look at, especially with language, is we want to make sure that we are getting scores based on what the child actually knows and not barriers because they don't speak the primary language, or not barriers related to just lingo. So for example, I lived in Wisconsin for a while, and if you gave me a vocabulary test and asked me to go point to the bubbler, I might fail, because what in the world is a bubbler? Well, come to find out, it's a water fountain. I didn't know that. I thought those people were weird. I was like, bubbler, I don't know, something that blows bubbles? Well, I don't know. Is it because I don't have a good vocabulary, I don't understand English, anything of that nature? No, it's just lingo. So we want to make sure that we're assessing what we're intending to assess. The famous example is when we first started measuring IQ, we looked at some kids who grew up in urban areas and we asked them to identify a bush. And they weren't familiar with a bush because of limited green space. And so we want to make sure that we are discerning actual things that we're trying to measure. And we also look at types of assessment. There are 3 major types: standardized assessments, criterion-based, and performance. Now standardized, you think SATs, everybody gets those. You take a test, you score, and you're forced into a distribution. And those are good. They kind of tell us where people fit within a range of typical development, but they don't necessarily tell us anything that's useful for intervention-related change. So we could look at criterion-based. So there are certain things that you need to pass, and checklists are a good example of criterion-based. We use a lot of those for diagnosing. And the last is actually kind of newer, performance-based. Creating a portfolio. So think about when we do your grades. Do I just grade you on tests? Do I just grade you on papers? Or do I kind of look at all of these and give you the opportunity to really show me what you know, show me what you can do? And these, in the field of early intervention especially, are the way that we are pushing people to assess, because we get more information. We can actually see what kids can do and we can understand. So whereas they might hit a floor effect and not do very well on a standardized test, these are sensitive to intervention-related change. So I might not get you to move from an IQ of 50 to 55, but I can get you to move from a level where you don't really understand abstract thinking at all to you're starting to get a few abstract concepts. Authentic assessment. There's so much to know, but let me encourage you to do this. Be a good consumer, a wise consumer of research. Be a critical thinker. Just don't take news at face value. There's some good stuff out there, but there's a lot of garbage. And if you can do anything, do not just Google and Wikipedia stuff. It will get you in trouble. Trust me. There's so much quality research that you can actually read and understand and discern yourselves. Take the time to do it. You will be an educated consumer. It will make you a better interventionist. It will make you a better student. And it'll make you a better friend to people who need to know the truth and good quality stuff that's out there. Thanks.